Hello, everybody, and you are very welcome to Successful Perspectives. Successful Perspectives, of course, is when we deep dive into the topic of leadership with a member from our very selective network, Boardroom by EMIR. For this conversation, I'm delighted to be joined by my friend and one of our members, Sachin Kerur, who is the managing partner for the Middle East at Reed Smith, the big global law firm. Sachin, always wonderful to see you, and you're very welcome on Successful Perspectives.
Thank you, Trevor. Great to be here.
I've had the pleasure of getting to know you in recent years, and these conversations, if I'm honest, are really just a great way for me to get free consultancy from wonderful leaders, and I get to pick your brains. Basically, this is what this is really about. So let's first delve into your leadership style as you see it, or your leadership philosophy. How would you characterize your leadership philosophy?
Trevor, for me, it starts with empathy. It follows a tone raised in a fantastic book by Gaurav Singham, one of my great friends, called Chief Empathy Officer. And I think for me, empathy is about being able to get into someone's shoes, trying to understand what an individual or a team that you're working with feel. I think until you can understand how one feels and how your team are feeling, it's very hard then to exhibit any other characteristic of leadership. So I would start with empathy. I think once you create that environment, then you can outline other key characteristics. Humor for me is absolutely key. I love my team to smile, to enjoy what is difficult environments and difficult roles. Also to show passion, because I enjoy my team being passionate about what they do, and having the confidence to lead. I think being creative and team focused as well. We work so well in teams. Some necessarily don't, but they have characteristics which could shine elsewhere. But for me, they would be the real key elements of what I would say are the philosophy of leadership.
And I love the fact, Sachin, that you brought in humor, right? I really enjoyed the points you weave together there, and it sounds like you think about your leadership philosophy quite a bit. Do you get an opportunity to reflect on this? How do you measure its success? What does that look like to you?
Look, I think you get to practice it every day, right? And that's the truth. And sometimes you have a good day and sometimes you have a bad day. Everyone has a good day and a bad day. I think in terms of measuring, success of your leadership, that's difficult. I think the measurement of that comes from how people are reacting to you, Trevor. I think if people around you are motivated, if they've got, as we've just discussed, smiles on their faces, if they're creative, if they feel empowered, then I think you as a leader are in the right space. I think you can be analytical or empirical about these things, but I think it's how the people around you are reacting to you. That to me is a great measure of leadership success.
And would you have considered yourself a natural leader when you were starting off your career, going and studying law? And I know you've had a very interesting career in terms of you've covered lots of very interesting markets and had a huge amount of success here in Dubai. Do you feel that you've ended being, managing partner running a region for a big law firm? Was that an inevitability for you? Did you see when you were younger, or let's say starting off in your career, because you're obviously still a young man, Sachin? But did you feel that it was an inevitability, you had these leadership traits, or it was something you have to develop within you as you went along?
Well, I'm certainly a young man still, Trevor. That's for sure. I don't. It's a really interesting question. I'm not convinced one can see leadership within yourself. I think it's quite a difficult thing to see. I think you can see it in other people, and other people can see it in you. So whether I ever saw myself as a natural born leader, I can't say I necessarily did. What I do know is that the job that I have is enhanced definitely by coaching. So whether I'm natural born or not, I feel business coaching is an essential support to what I do. And when I was first offered coaching, I was very critical of that decision. I thought there was something wrong with me. But actually, in time, it's got to the point where I would not take a role now in any management or other particular role without a solid business coach. It's essential. So I think that is that's where I see myself today. Certainly.
And now here's the benefit of an external view from a friend and fellow professional here in Dubai. So viewing you over the years, I would go in and give talks for you and your team, and we've had lots of different interactions over the years. You strike me as somebody who's very passionate, always trying to do better. How do we improve, and always trying to kind of learn. And that's to your point around the coaching. And you've invited me to different stuff. You strike me as somebody with a very much a growth mindset. So maybe you're right. I agree. Sometimes it's difficult to have that self-analysis or introspective awareness of yourself. What about when you're looking at, say, a team member or somebody within the team? You said I can see leadership in other people. What does that look like for you? What do you think is a great kind of micro signal of a leader for tomorrow, so to speak?
Without doubt, going back to my original point of somebody who shows empathy, someone who is both output and people focused, but for me, passionate. When I look around my team and I'm identifying leaders of the future, I'm looking at who has that passion to not just succeed, but to succeed in a way that is decent, is with integrity. That's what I would look for. And because I really think you can then string together those various other elements I talked about around confidence and other things like that. So they would be my key attributes when I'm looking around my teams to see tomorrow's future leaders.
Now, as we've already said, Sachin, you're an incredibly young man. You've achieved this great success in so few years. However, taking that into account, when you started out in your career, when you think back, do you see how the responsibility of leadership has evolved in terms of, say even 20 years ago, it seemed to be at least very much focused on P&L and profitability and maximizing shareholder value. And now, of course, that's important for an organization to continue and to succeed naturally. But there's so much more going on there. Now it's like to everything you've described, like even just think about how you started this conversation, around empathy, compassion, trying to understand where people are coming from. I'm not sure that was a narrative that was often coming out of leaders' mouths kind of 20 years ago. And now it's around culture, people, the impact side of things, which I know you guys do quite a lot of as well. How do you see that evolution of leadership? What's your take on it?
Yeah, look, I think you make a very good point. I think what is often the words often used around leadership today is transformational or transformation, and I think leaders are expected to help transform. It isn't about the status quo or steady as she goes. I think it is about changing behavior and thought and creating relationships and institutions and social contacts. And never has that been more the case since we came out of the pandemic conditions. So that I think leaders have been cast in a wider role, one that requires a lot more resilience, for sure. And I think great leaders today would need to remain focused on transformation because that is what is expected. I think they also need to be focused on remaining good citizens, and whatever and however leadership, whatever it throws at one, staying as a good citizen with integrity in the role, I think is critical. That hasn't changed.
Yeah, the values piece. One last question, Sachin, before we shift on to have a little bit of fun with our rapid fire round. What's the best piece of career advice that you've received that you would share to some of our viewers who are the rising stars, the leaders of tomorrow?
Well, the one that was always said to me, which I'm afraid I never really did adhere to, was always be on time. But that's another point. I think, Trevor, in terms of career advice, I think what I've just said just then, I think being a good citizen and acting with integrity, but also doing what you really want to do, having the passion to do something, not because you're told to do it, but because you really want to do it. And that's when you'll give your all. And understanding where your strengths lie and working on the challenges that you face, but also making sure that your strengths come out and that you are properly able to demonstrate those. But for me, it comes down to doing what you really feel passionate about and not necessarily kowtowing to what is expected of you. And that would be, and that's the sort of advice I got, and I would be passing that down to my teams and my children constantly.
Wise words. Sachin Kerur, thank you so much for being on Successful Perspectives and sharing your pearls of wisdom. It's always great to see you, and thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Trevor. Really enjoyed it.